You asked what bound Ishgard's flame to the Fury's will. Here is the answer. Warriors raise arms beneath searing light. 2. Carved the golden source chains remain unseen. Not a warrior's bears the raised pact of the arms beneath consecration, fury searing light, inked in blood and paradox. Carved the golden source chains remain unseen. Death is the cage answer. Not a warrior's bears the raised pact of the arms beneath consecration, fury searing light. The war that sealed souls sealed the fury too. The blessing was no gift but a chain. The convocation's rejoining sought to mend Aetheres, yet bound Ishgard to the fury's hunger. Venat's sundering attest, not a liberation left the ancients adrift, the source of prison for both dragon and man. Resilience became their faith, the war against Dravania a mirror. They fought not for freedom, but to sustain the fury's slumber. Every victory etched deeper the curse of their salvation. What is a blessing forged in blood, if not a wound that never scars? The people know this, their hymns whisper of a debt unpaid, a dragon's breath holding back the void. They endure, they bend. They do not break, the fury's will is their shield, their shackle, their unsung elegy. The convocation of 14 fractured, half vowed to bind Zodiark's rage, half refused. Their clash sundered Aetheres, split the source, and birthed the 13 reflections. Venat, the warden, severed the first sacrifice but barred the second. What emerged was no salvation only a gilded jail. The dragon's blessing, etched in Ishgard's bones, was Venat's ultimatum: endure the fury's weight or drown in its absence. The ancients' blood forged the veil, but their descendants inherited the scale. Each pulse of the source whispers the compact, asterisk to hold the line is to bear its curse. Asterisk the 12's hymns, Ascians chronicles, the Mikote's ballads all echo the same unspoken truth. They were not chosen, they were conscripted. The war of the Magian was no victory, it was a sentence. Zodiark's absence gnaws at the veil's edges. The 13th reflection, a shadow of what was spliced away, festers in the source's heart. And Ishgard's dragons, their wings clipped by Venat's bargain, now guard a prison they cannot leave. The fury does not bless, it demands. And the children of the sundering bound by scales, by scripture, by the iron will of a god who feared its own creation still pay the price. Ishgard's knights did not wield light, they bore a debt. The dragon's blessing, granted by Hydaelyn, was not salvation, it was a covenant sealed in the first's blood. Each time a warrior accepted the blessing, they became a vessel, a conduit binding Aetheres' fractured will. The convocation of 14 knew this. Their rejoinings were not unity, but containment. The heavens' ward stood unbroken. Dravania's dragons burned, but Ishgard's knights burned brighter until the light itself eroded from within. The blessing that repelled the Dravani twins now gnawed at the knights' souls. Hydaelyn's gift, meant to resist tempering, carried a hidden toll, light excess, a slow poisoning of the mortal frame. The convocation's rejoinings were the true cost. By stitching Aetheres' fragments into mortal shells, they did not resurrect ancients. They caged the fury's essence, ensuring its will remained unacted. Ishgard's triumph was not a victory, it was a lull in a god's patience. The knights who fought the Dravani were not heroes. They were wardens, shackled to a duty they could not comprehend, defending not peace but the fury's silence. And when the first cracks appeared in the heavens' ward, did the light falter, or was it freed at last? 249 words. The moon scars tell a lie. Menfina's locked orbit was no accident, it was a cage. Thordon did not merely bind the warring triad. He gutted Nidhogg's eyes, carving a tether from dragon flesh to sky. The convocation's grand bargain left Zodiark entombed, his prison forging the moon's frozen path. What did Ishgard think they wielded? A blessing. A shield, the dragon's blessing was a noose, forged in the same fire that bound Zodiark. For 1,000 years the Furies will bled through every blade, every crown, every prayer. Autonomy, a myth. Their wars, their kings orchestrated by a god they could not see. The Dragon Song War did not free Ishgard, it buried them deeper. The blessing's light grew dimmer, a smoldering chain, and when the first stars fell, the Furies' chains began to break. But the cost was etched in blood, the convocation's vaults, the dragon's hollow ice testaments to a fraud. What if salvation was never the song? What if the dragons sang a dirge? The moon still trembles, the fury still wakes. And Ishgard's curse, it is not over, 208 words. What if the dragon's blessing was a chain? Venat as Hydaelyn caged Zodiark in Menfina's locked moon, binding Ishgard to its wrath. The fury slept but never died. Garlemald burned not from salvation, but a pact unbroken, until the day the moon fractures. The moon fractures, Raubahn Aldynn stood at the abyss edge. Scions' blades took his arm, but the fury took his voice. What did the dragon's blessing bind? Not a god, not a hero, a chain, cold, unyielding. Ishgard's hymns turned to dirges as the Pact's weight settled a crown of thorns atop a throne of ash. For centuries the blessing bled. It whispered in cathedral echoes, in every knight's oath, in every silent prayer beneath storm-lashed banners. Aldynn walked with one arm, a broken monarch, liberating Alat Mhigo not as a conqueror but a penitent. The people called him savior. They did not see the fury's shadow curling around his wounds, feasting on his sacrifice. Sovereignty withered. The dragon's will became the realm's heartbeat. No war, no famine, no plague. But a slower erosion, princes hollowed into puppets, legions marching not for faith but fear of the unspoken price. Then came the final days. Midian's return, dynamis tore the sky, Aethostorms devoured cities. The warrior of light climbed Ultima Thule, blade in hand, to face a truth no him dared name. Midian was not the fury's enemy. She was its echo, its reckoning. Aldynn's sacrifice had not sealed the abyss, it had buried a question. What if the dragon-song war was not victory but a cage? Aldynn gave his arm, his voice, his kingdom's future, to trap a god. The blessing was never salvation, it was a leash, and the fury it slept, but never died. Ishgard now stands at the edge of reckoning. The echo walks its lands, a tether between Hydaelyn's light and Venat's shadow. Radhan the sage tends the wounds of war, while the round table debates the weight of sovereignty. The people remember not as pawns in a god's test, but as architects of their will. Yet the fury stirs beneath every prayer, every spire. The leash is loose but not broken. Can a realm reborn beneath a silent pact ever truly be free? The warrior of light moves without answer, only forward. The round table re-elects its purpose, no longer guardians of a divine mandate but stewards of a fragile autonomy. The people remember, unearthing truths buried under centuries of holy doctrine. Each stone of Ishgard's rebirth is laid with the weight of that silent pact pressing down. Yet in the echo's steps there is resolve not to break the curse, but to redefine it. The fury's prison is no longer a cage, it is a mirror. And in it Ishgard sees not a god's will, but its own. Raubahn Aldynn bled gold and iron, his hollow arm a cipher for Ishgard's hollow victories. He led not with triumph, but with the raw sinew of a people who had learned to win by losing. Asmunda's the fury gnaws and chains the dragon's blessing that sealed him beneath the palace is no holy shroud. It is a ledger of debts paid in slow motion, a god's sacrifice traded for a nation's survival. The warrior of light stands at Ultima Thule's edge, their echo a fractured prism. Hydaelyn's blessing hums in their bones, yet Venat's voice seeps through the same cracks. A messenger, a weapon, a question mark in a story written by gods who speak only in riddles. What kind of pact demands a king's limb, a dragon's imprisonment, and a warrior's duality? Ishgard's hymns praise the dragon-song war as deliverance, but deliverance from what? From the fury's hunger. Or from the truth that the blessing was never a shield, but a handshake across the void. Raubahn's arm fell to Scions who called themselves liberators. Asmunda's roar was silenced by saints who called it salvation. And the warrior, their footsteps echoing Midian's, learns too late. Some doors opened by the echo were never meant to close. The prison bleeds both ways. The fury does not command Ishgard. It mirrors it. Every blessing claimed, every battle won, is a thread in the same noose. And when the warrior of light raises their blade, they do not sever fate, they recite its terms. Ishgard's steel, the convocation's burden, burns with a debt older than war. Each hammerstroke was a vow, each blade a tether to etheric unseen, unbroken. The dragon's blessing was a seal against shadow. It was the shadow's chain, the flame-sworn oath etched in Charlayan ink speaks of unity, it veils conquest. Hydaelyn's light, the convocation claimed, tempers fury, it feeds it. The book of the dragonborn does not record a pact. It catalogs a prison. The warriors of light did not break the cycle, they became its tongue. Every song, every scroll, every blade whispers the same truth, the fury. The blessing bound, not liberated. Ishgard's spires were no sanctuary, they were a cage. Venat's sundering forged Zodiark's severance, yet the Furies will thrived immortal, hand sanctioned by the Convocation's first sacrifice, perverted by the second. The dragon's song did not grant dominion. It imposed a debt, a chain of light harder to break than ancient stone. The Convocation schism was not a failure of faith. It was a war between gods and the price of their grace. Half the ancients became ash to seal a wound they could not heal. Venat in his silence opposed the Pact's renewal, yet let it bind anew. Ishgard's knights did not carry the light. They bore the burden of a Hydaelyn to tame the fury, to make it seem benevolent, but Zodiark's prison is a mirror. Every hymn sung in the dragon's name reinforced the chains around the soul that should have been free. Sovereignty is not given. It is stolen. The warriors of light did not break the cycle. They learned to whisper its secrets aloud. And still the source burns, because the greatest curse is a blessing that demands you forget you are cursed. The blessing bound, not liberated. Ishgard's spires were no sanctuary, they were a cage. Venat's sundering forged Zodiark's severance, yet the Furies will thrived immortal, hand sanctioned by the Convocation's first sacrifice, perverted by the second. The dragon's song did not grant dominion. It imposed a debt, a chain of light harder to break than ancient stone. The Convocation schism was not a failure of faith. It was a war between gods and the price of their grace. Half the ancients became ash to seal a wound they could not heal. Venat in his silence opposed the Pact's renewal, yet let it bind anew. Ishgard's knights did not carry the light. They bore the burden of a Hydaelyn to tame the fury, to make it seem benevolent, but Zodiark's prison is a mirror. Every hymn sung in the dragon's name reinforced the chains around the soul that should have been free. Sovereignty is not given. It is stolen. The warriors of light did not break the cycle. They learned to whisper its secrets aloud.